Good evening, folks, and welcome back to another episode of When It Was Real. The show focuses on the glory days of the WWWF in the 1970s, the perfect time to grow up as a professional wrestling fan. Now, I'm just a carpenter, but that other guy, he's the general contractor. He is the one and only Nikita Brezhnikov. Nikita, how are you, my friend?
Good evening.
Alfred. All right, Nikita, how about introducing our very special guest of the evening?
I am very happy to say that we have Mr. Michael Omansky, and you talk about somebody that has knowledge of that WWWF, especially Philadelphia. That's what I really want you for, Mike. The one and only, from Macabania himself, Michael Omansky.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Mike. All right, guys. So we're going to just do a quick commercial, pay the bills, and then we'll get into the show. Give me 1 second here. Here we go. This is Benny Scala, the one and only player. Folks, I am beyond excited to be co-hosting this new show, When It Was Real. And I am just as excited to be announcing our new sponsor, the Free Spirited Company. Free Spirited is a phenomenal old-school clothing company that specializes in short and long sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, graphic tees, heck, even yoga pants. These t-shirts are, to quote Rocky's manager Mickey Goldmill, a wake of art. Yours truly will be rocking the Free Spirited merch on each and every episode of When It Was Real. Not only are these shirts eye-catching, but they are very comfortable as well. Like what you see? Please go to shopfreespirited.com and use our special code MP20 to receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Again, that is shopfreespirited.com, and that code is MP20. As the poet laureate of the Monte The Pharaoh YouTube channel, I will leave you with this. If you like what you see, go buy a tee. Heck, maybe 2 or 3. When your friends tell you, hey, you look like the bomb, send them over to shopfreespirited.com. Well, as always, before we get started, quick toast to the great wrestlers of our day who make this show necessary. Salute.
Zdravia. All right, Benny, go get them.
Yeah, Mike. So, on Dan and Benny in the Ring, the first question we ask everyone, and because it's like a snowflake, there are no two same answers. How did you get started watching wrestling as a kid? I mean, a lot of people, it's their grandparents, or their parents. What year did you get started? And who did you watch growing up?
I started in 1961. I think I was in 4th grade, and Buddy Rogers had just won the title from Pat O'Connor. And because he was controlled by Vince Sr. in the Northeast, I saw Buddy Rogers wrestle on TV, do interviews all the time, mostly from Washington TV, the A show at the time, occasionally Bridgeport, the B show, Connecticut. So
I think you're the first guest that ever saw Buddy Rogers on TV. Wow.
I saw him in person. I got my parents to take me to Newark Armory, March 1963, Texas Death Tag Match. Him and The Shadow lost to Bobo Brazil and handsome Johnny Barron, who temporarily turned on Rogers and was a face. And
I was going to say Johnny Barron, I thought was a huge heel, so he did turn babyface.
Briefly face fought Rogers at the Garden, won the match in Newark as a tag, then got a one-on-one match in Newark, which he lost. Then he turned back heel to team with Rogers again.
Now, back then was Bobby Davis his manager?
Yes, Davis was terrific. Probably one of the great managers of all time, up there with Paul Heyman.
Nikita, there's a guy that does not get his just due. Every time I see on Facebook, the Mount Rushmore of great managers, you never see Bobby Davis. But, I mean, that guy, to me, was one of the greatest ever.
Yeah, but he was before anybody really started to click, on things like I'd say the 70s. But I'll tell you, Mike, I wasn't there. But the first match at the Baltimore Civic Center, April the 9th of 1963, was Bobo Brazil versus Buddy Rogers. So, wow, those two were running all over the territory.
Correct, all the time. Brazil sort of won a match in Newark Armory by submission, but refused the title because Rogers complained of a low blow. So they got out of it that way. Brazil was usually on top in Newark or evenly billed with San Martino.
I think Bobo almost won the NWA title too. It was the same kind of circumstance that I forgot who he beat. Maybe it was Kanitsky. I'm not sure.
Well, the match in Newark that I described was for the NWA title.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah. Wow. When I heard Buddy Rogers and Bobby Davis, man, that brings back great memories.
I love Rogers. I finally got to meet him before he passed away at a John Arezzi convention in New York, and I was thrilled.
Well, yeah, he was from the Cherry Hill, Haddonfield area, right, Mike? Yeah, so he was still active around there. And that guy, I just saw somebody posted on the great WWWF 1970 to 83 site that Buddy Rogers, at age 68, he went to pick up his lunch, and some idiot was mouthing off and getting out of control. And Buddy said, "Look, shut up." And the guy said, "Why don't you get out of here, old man?" And he said, "That's it. He called me an old man." Kaboom!
Figure 4. Put on the figure 4 till the police arrived.
That's beautiful.
I mean, that guy was he ever in bad shape? I mean, even back when he did that Rogers Corner in the early '80s, when he managed Jimmy Snuka, he was what? He was in his early 60s, maybe, but he was in phenomenal shape.
He wrestled a few matches. Unfortunately, he quit or was let go, whatever, before the Garden. Arnold Skoland took his place to do the tag match against Morocco and Albano.
Okay. I'm lucky, Mike, because the last time he wrestled with Snuka was September 17th of '83 in Baltimore. They wrestled Albano and Morocco. And I was ringside, so it was like, man, I thought it was going to do the circuit, of course, at the time, but then I don't know. Somebody said he got hurt. Some people say he had he and Vince, banged heads about money. So we'll never know.
It was probably money, but you don't know.
It's always money, right? Mike, a quick question though. Now, you're a wrestling journalist. When did you decide to extend your fandom, your love as a fan, to making wrestling your livelihood, journalism? And how did you break in? How did you break into the world of journalism?
Okay, obviously I started reading wrestling magazines early on. Ring Wrestling, Wrestling Review, Wrestling World, and Boxing Illustrated Wrestling News. I bought.
That was a great magazine.
They printed results. Only they and Ring Wrestling had detailed results. Any event, I discovered the world of fan clubs. I started getting bulletins. I was getting results and stuff from all over. I had my favorite was Mad Mania by Bert Ray, a monthly. He printed results and detailed news you couldn't get elsewhere. Ringside Scranton from Pennsylvania, a bulletin from Y. I started writing for these columns. Then, at the end of high school, I wrote a letter to the late publisher of The Wrestler and said, I want to do the fan club column. And they said, fine. And then I started doing articles for them I was paid for. And then I knew Lou Eskin, who lived in my town and who smartened me up about wrestling years before that, and became friendly. And he gave me the opportunity when I took over Wrestling Review, to edit Wrestling Review for a couple of years. And I put in as one of my features, I rated the top 200 wrestlers. I rated midgets and top 50 tag teams, which was a feat in the territory era. And obviously, I could only go not on computer, but on results that I could get to figure out the rankings of who could beat who. But that's how I got into it. Then, when I went to business school, I had a little publication of my own called Wrestling Wonders. And I wrote it up one night, sent it to a dozen fans. I just said, what do you think? I didn't ask for money. People send me money. I started to expand it. I got together with a printer in Newark, New Jersey, started printing nice color covers and good magazine, and edited, published it, sold it outside of arenas around the Northeast, Philly Spectrum, The Garden, White Plains, etc. That's how I sort of got into it.
So that was called Wrestling Wonders. And what year did you start doing that?
Wrestling Wonders, about
Okay.
1977.
Okay.
The biggest issue was 78, 79, and it helped pay my way through business school.
Damn, very good, Mike. But I tell you what, when you said the ring wrestling and the results, that was king. That because I loved it for that reason. And it wouldn't just be the Northeast, anywhere, California.
And it was fall by fall. It was 2 out of 3. They said who pinned who. It was great.
Yes. That's my favorite, no matter what. We love a lot of guys like George Napolitano and people like that, but ring wrestling, man, daddy, that was it. That just had everything you could want. Couldn't wait for that to hit the stand every month.
I have a story about that. My parents used to go. I grew up on Long Island, Farmingdale, Long Island, Nassau County, and my parents used to go to this farmers market in Hicksville. They used to like to buy provolone and pepperoni, typical Italians, right? But there was when you walk down to the end of the farmers market, there was an old bookstore, and I had just become a wrestling fan, and I looked, and there was a box of magazines that said, let me maybe if I find a baseball magazine. I found like Ring Wrestling, Wrestling Review from like 1960. I begged my parents for an advance. I think I was broke for the next 6 months, but I had all these magazines, and I remember the first Wrestling Review that I bought in 1968 had the ratings were very comprehensive. I think more so than any of the other magazines. But I remember looking at it, and I didn't recognize probably 80% of the wrestlers because all I knew was the guys I saw on TV from DC every week.
Well, in those days, wrestling magazines and fan club bulletins opened your eyes to the other territories.
Without a doubt. And Mike, just so you know, you got a pen pal there. Benny was featured in one of the magazines as one of those pen pals. He's got a picture of it.
Yeah, I was in the November 1969 issue of The Wrestler. Except they screwed me over. They put down Spiros Arion was my favorite. I guess in retro, it's because I put Bruno, of course. Maybe they had too many Brunos and they needed an Arion, and Arion was a babyface back then. But in retrospect, it wasn't a bad choice because I love the guy.
Arion was fantastic. He was an incredible face in the 60s, almost never
the Golden
lost.
Greek, then became the Iron Greek.
Got pinned once in Philly on his way out, came back into started as a face, but you could see the heel turn coming. I saw an interview when he was still a face when he told Albano, if you interfere, I'm going to beat your brains in. Didn't sound like a face. It was great.
Now, Mike, I've asked this question of other people.
Yeah.
You were both at the Garden and Philadelphia and at the television matches as well.
Yep.
Who had more heat? Bruno versus Arion or Bruno versus Larry Zbyszko?
Probably a toss-up, because in both cases, if you take crowds in sold out at the Garden, streets were lined with people for each of those matches. I mean, physically hard to get through. Sold out felt for each one. You couldn't get a ticket if you didn't have one. So it was probably a toss-up. The difference was this. People feared and believed Arion could beat Bruno.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody
Mhm.
believed
Amen.
Zbyszko could beat him, but they wanted to see Bruno shut him up. It was different. Ariane was the ultimate title threat. Even though he's not the one who got the belt in the end, he was Bruno's most dangerous challenger. He's the one who never lost, almost never. He was like
And
unpinnable.
they both had that legitimate history where they were friends with Bruno for years, and not just that bullshit they do on television. They miss the time. It's like, yeah, these two guys were legitimately friends. They have a history, and then the heel turn really meant something. Like,
Right.
when they did it with my Via, it was in Backlund. It's like, it's good and it's cool, but it's like, it's okay.
It's funny, when Ariane was a face, he would, after Bruno knocked someone off, the guy would go next month in the Garden against Ariane, who'd pin him. And he'd pin him faster than Bruno did. So years later, when it was the heel run, one of the first things Ariane brought up was the fact he beat everybody faster than Bruno could.
Very good.
Nikita, though, really, I think Ariane was maybe the second heel turn I ever saw, but the first was Jimmy Valiant. But I was shocked with Jimmy Valiant, but I mean, only to a certain extent, because Jimmy Valiant was not in the territory that long before he turned. I mean, where Ariane had that history.
Hold on, because I'm going to get Mike on that one. But before we go to that with Jimmy Valiant, when Ariane had turned in December 16th, and then the first match in the Garden, he wrestled Larry. That was
Correct.
almost a murder, right, Mike?
It was a murder. Basically, it was advertised on TV as a match that shouldn't take place. They interviewed Ariane, said, "Why did you sign for this match?" He said, "Hey, Larry's my friend. I'll take care of him." And from the opening bell, after 1 minute, people were screaming to stop the match. That's how effective it was. And people were screaming like a murder was taking place. It went about 7 or 8 minutes before hot seat and pin. And then Bruno ran in, still in his street clothes, not yet dressed to wrestle, to protect Zbyszko and stop it. And he pointed at Ariane, said, "Next time, me. Next time, me." And people went wild. And I got my tickets the next day.
See, for our fans out there, Michael Omansky was at ringside. He was there. We're not just Mike not talking like watching it on TV. He was there. He was present for it. That's great, Mike. Thank you.
I mean,
That's
how
great emotion.
perfectly orchestrated that was, though.
Yeah.
But Ariane also, as I said, had that credibility because he hardly ever got pinned. He won his matches as a face. Of course, he was pinning Strongbow everywhere after the heel turn and fighting Bruno throughout the Northeast, selling out everywhere.
And it made sense, too, because Chief was going to be gone by August. So it's like Chief was a business guy, for the company. It's like, sure, they got to put Ariane over to meet Bruno. It worked out beautiful. But that setup, even with Strongbow and Ariane, was like an orchestra, perfectly done, man. Everybody did their thing.
The feathers. He destroyed the headdress from his ancestors.
Yes.
Stuck up his nose.
Oh, man, just beautiful.
Yeah, it was well done.
And with the Valiant brothers added in there for extra measure, and Lou Albano. Well, of course, on television, when the heel turn happened and Ariane walked off first with Albano, it's like, man, I don't know how many TVs got destroyed that day, but I bet there had to be a bunch.
I was at Philadelphia Arena after the turn, and he came out with Fred Blassie, escorted by police to protect them.
And it wasn't any of that bullshit Monday Night Raw wannabe wrestlers dressed up as cops. Those were real police because they were fearing that his life was in danger.
And remember, a big difference. Back then, most people who attended thought it was real. Bad guys, heels were evil. Good guys, good people, faces. So they believed it to be real. That's why Ariane scared people, that he was going to take Bruno.
Mike, I'll tell you, and that's why I titled the book When It Was Real, because that was always in my head. People can say whatever they wanted to us about it was this, it was that. We believe. And they made it believable. That was the difference. You could believe what was happening.
And your book was great. I loved the book. Is
Thank
anybody
you, sir.
watching who hasn't read it, get it. It's incredible.
Thank you, sir.
It's like going in the Wayback Machine. Remember Peabody and Sherman?
Yeah.
On the Rocky and the Bullwinkle show. The way
Oh, yeah.
you start reading that book, and the good thing about that book is that you could, just randomly open any chapter. It's not, you don't have to follow it in sequence. You could open up any chapter and just get right into it.
Yeah, you can pick a year and it's there. But you can see as I got older and more involved, 77 through 79 is really half of the book right there. But Benny, when you brought up, and Mike, I'm sure you were present when Jimmy Valiant had the heel turn. And there you go with that was not Beautiful Bobby. Oh, it was Beautiful Bobby, but not with Bobby Harmon, but the Wizard. And the
Right.
Wizard was sort of new, right, at the time?
Yeah. But Jimmy Valiant never got a shot for the title against Morales in New York, but he did get matches in Philly, which I saw at the arena. Back then, I had the tapings every third Tuesday, but a house show every other Saturday night. So for 3 years as a student at University of Pennsylvania, I walked up to the arena and saw the shows.
Mike, you were lucky. 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, plus TV. It's like, wow. Now, that was a big building, though, right? The Philadelphia Arena.
Not huge. It held maybe 4,000 people or so. It was owned by a woman named Edna Toppy, and Vince Sr. sat next to her first row at the tapings.
Wow.
She always showed up.
I never knew
By
that.
the way, admission was not $500 or $1,000. It was free or 50 cents for a tape.
There you go.
It was blue collar all the way, right? I mean, the average Joe could afford to get into the arena and watch a match.
It was blue collar.
Yeah,
and
take out a title loan for your car to watch WrestleMania.
You had the famous Muhammad Ali in the building. Remember with when they
Monsoon.
were setting, yep, with Monsoon when they were setting up the pay-per-view. It's like, man, you can't beat that kind of history. It's just today, God bless what they do today. I don't knock them. I don't follow it. I can't. Not after what we've experienced. And I have a tape collection that I watch. So it's like I just can't get involved with that. To me, it's not the same. Too much has been exposed. Too much has been said. Back then, of course, we didn't have the internet. What you described as the magazines, that was our internet, people. For you, those of you that aren't old enough or that are old enough, or if you had lucky enough, like if I knew Michael Omansky, I could call him, but that would be expensive.
Right.
Even to call Baltimore to
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
I mean, when somebody said I'm on a long distance call, which nowadays is meaningless, but back then, like the toll, it's like the cab, right? You're watching the meter tick. Same thing with a phone call.
And if your parents got the bill, you were going to get When It Was Real.
Oh yeah.
By the way, at the Philadelphia Arena, the very first night, Vince McMahon Jr. showed up to announce. He joined Bill Cardille, who didn't last too long after that.
What happened to Ray Morgan? Why didn't he?
It was great. What happened was this. He did the shows from Washington, D.C. and Bridgeport. They switched the show to Philly, which was a long trip for him. He asked Vince Sr. for a raise. Vince Sr. said, "No raise, you're fired." He then, the story goes, he turned to Junior and said, you're the announcer. At least this is the story Vince Jr. tells. And he went on and he said he didn't know how to announce. Initially, he was correct. It was, look at this move, look at that move, wham-a-lam, wham-a-lam. Ooh, ouch, that hurt. He eventually became quite a good announcer.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, we always talk about like Gordon Soley and
He's great.
Vance Russell, and with Bob Caudle. But I don't think Ray Morgan gets his just due. He was a great announcer.
He was straight, like Gordon Soley. Took everything dead serious. It was real. It was serious. He was respectful. And sometimes he would get upset, but it depended on what was going on.
But the interviews were great. Yeah,
intermission
interviews, fantastic.
Intermission interviews.
Yeah, I wish. I mean, like seeing to find them on YouTube is very rare. I think I found like 4 or 5 shows from like 66, 65. I wish there was more of them because I love to see those.
I'll tell you where those shows came from. They came from the Martinez family. There was a promoter, Pedro Martinez, upstate New York, had a bunch of tapes. I met his son and put out wrestling videos called Wrestling Classics. Ron Martinez, who briefly was the IWA announcer. And they acquired some of those old tapes. Not the best shows from Washington, but still had Ray Morgan announcing. So that's what you're seeing on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I think one of the most famous pictures is Ray Morgan interviewing the new champion, Ivan Koloff, with Lou Albano. Lou Albano with a suit and tie on, and it's like, and the old belt, and it was like, boy, that really looked sharp. That was
and he wasn't in shape, but he wasn't like he was in semi shape then, Lou. Not too bad.
Now, Mike, when you're the master of Philadelphia Arena, a couple of matches I want to run by you. The steel cage match, tag team, Chief and Pedro against the Spoiler and Lou Albano.
Was there two straight falls, except the first fall was on disqualification.
In a cage match.
It's a cage match. And, first fall, DQ. Second, Albano bloodied up, the usual. So that was it. 2 straight for the faces. But I never heard of a DQ in any cage match.
Yeah, that's new to me too. Yeah.
And to the best of my knowledge, that's the only WWWF cage match with a tag team that they ever had.
That's the only one I remember seeing.
Yeah, I can't find one anywhere else. And I guess it was a debacle. I mean, the NWA did it right, but WWF, because it always felt it was like, it seems like the winner's the guy running away. I get it. You got to beat the hell out of the other guy to get by him, but it should be like the cage is to keep everybody there until you get a real pin or a submission. So it was kind of strange.
To your point, when Baron Cicluna came back for another run, he fights Morales in Philly a couple times. They finish with a cage match. In that match, Morales leaps over him, jumps out of the cage. He didn't beat him up. He just escaped. It's exactly what you said. And Baron's, what happened? But he wasn't beaten.
Poor Baron.
So poor Baron. He always got disrespected. He's like Rodney Dangerfield.
He's like Rodney. No respect.
Right.
Wow. Now, see, but that cage was like wooden too, wasn't it, Mike? In the beginning,
sort of. It was different.
Yeah, it wasn't like a chicken wire thing.
It took a while before it became a steel cage.
Yeah, well, you know why that was, because they had to get Phil Zacco to dig into his pockets and Vince Sr. to say, we got to buy a real friggin' cage, and something that's going to stay up. Did you ever see one come down, Mike, over the years?
Yes. In the old days, it took them a while to put it up. It took a while to take down. And they call a brief intermission each time they did it. Now, of course, it's put together just, it's a cage.
Yeah.
It's different era.
Wow. When we mentioned that cage, that tag match in the cage, the Spoiler, I loved the Spoiler. And it seemed like he and Chief just had a running battle going throughout Philadelphia, which was good, no complaint. But how was the reaction there with those two going at it?
Pretty good. Strongbow was fairly popular. Back then, he didn't lose. He was protected. So he had great credibility. It wasn't till Arion came on that he was pinned right and left. Before that, he was protected. So those two were an even match, pretty much, because Spoiler was being protected to fight Pedro in each city.
Now they had the next 2 weeks later another first, an 8-man tag team match: Chief, Victor, Sonny King, and El Olympico against the Spoiler, Chuck O'Connor, and Tanaka and Fuji. Because we never had an 8-man tag before, you know.
Match.
Yeah, a cluster. Usually those matches were 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5, but you could guarantee heels lose one on DQ. So it was really 2 out of 3 in disguise.
But
nothing.
For the fans that don't know, when we say 3 out of 5 with a 2-hour time limit, we would get 40 minutes usually, right?
You would. The first fall would be the DQ. The heels would be DQ. So many times I saw Tarzan Tyler in a 6-man tag get DQ'd in the first fall. He went on, "Oh my God, I've been disqualified." He's crying the blues, crying to the ref. A horrible, horrible thing took place.
Oh my, that's wild. I love it. Now, Mike, were you there the night Morales lost? When Stasiak pinned him?
Yes, I was there.
Please tell us.
Okay. It was a standard match for a while. And the ending came when Morales and Stasiak kicks off the ropes. And so both men's shoulders are down. Ref counts a pin. No one says anything. Gorilla Monsoon runs in, rushes Morales out. Buddy Wagner says, "Let's hear it for Pedro Morales." They did not announce a winner. People assumed Morales retained. The next morning, 2 things. I was in Philly at the time as a student. The newspaper said Stasiak pinned him, won the title. We had wrestling on TV. Vince Jr. did a voiceover saying, "Last night in Philadelphia, Stan Stasiak hard punched his way to victory." There was no hard punch, by the way. Now, because I knew Stasiak was fighting Bruno at the Garden, I figured title change. So I got a ticket, took a train into the Garden to see Bruno win it back. Ironic part was celebration was as long as the match. Bruno jumped up and down, all excited that he won the title, even though in real life he didn't want the title.
That was the last thing he wanted, right?
But it was like, "Oh my God, I got it. Wow." And the fans were in jubilation.
Now, I'm sure the fans had to go absolutely crazy too, though, right?
What?
The fans had to go nuts that Bruno won the title back.
Nuts.
Now, we've had other discussions on the show about when Bruno was defeated by Superstar in Baltimore. A couple of weeks ago, we had George Napolitano on. Yep. What was the reaction when you found out that Morales? I mean, did it seem like Morales's popularity was diminishing in Philadelphia?
No, he was okay in Philly and New York. He was not worth much in Boston. In Boston, Bruno was still the main eventer. The Italian North End always turned out to see Bruno. So Bruno was on top for years without the belt. But Morales was drawing a bad element in some areas and was hit and miss. He could draw in New York for some reason because a big Hispanic Puerto Rican population. But ironically, you bring it up. Most of the time, he won the match by hitting his opponent in the head and getting blood. He didn't pin the guy. He didn't pin Fred Blassie in New York, for example. There's one guy after another. You could pin the lesser people like Boondog, Maine. You couldn't pin the top guys. Strange.
That's really interesting.
as a champ.
And Moondog Maine, I loved. 73 was the year of the Moondog. That guy was crazy.
In Philly, he main evented time after time in tag and 6-man tags before he fought Morales. For months, he was in main events, looking good, attacking the faces, beating up Morales, taking no bumps, not getting hurt. So they kept that going until it was time for his one-on-one match.
And, I can't get it, Mike. It always seemed like it was one and done with him against Pedro. It was never like return matches.
No, it was one shot. As a matter of fact, when Vince, they always announced the next show at the Garden, what the matches would be before the last match. Vince Jr. was the ring announcer tonight, and he said, Pedro Morales has the title against Moondog Maine. And people said, who? He hadn't been well established. He had a few TV wins against enhancement talent, which we called jobbers. But enhancement talent, nicer way to say it.
Well, Moondog was in the Pacific Northwest, right? Wasn't he in
yes.
Don Owens territory?
Yes, exactly.
Him and Tony Bourne.
Right.
But they put him with Lou, and that was it. The two crazy people together, and we just were like, kill him, Chief, kill him, Bruno, get rid of these guys.
Yeah. Albano was great. I met him after this era a number of times. Once I met him with Bruno at they're shooting a commercial for a company I did business with called Phone Programs, who set up a lunch for me and Bruno because they knew I was big into wrestling. I got to talk to Albano. Then I was with Albano one night when Gary Capetta had an event in southern Jersey, starting his book tour. And then another night, Albano was doing a roast, and Bruno was there. So I saw the two of them at a table we sat at the thing that was honoring them. So interesting guys.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I tell you what, Mike, since you mentioned that, I got your poster. I'll see how much I can get on there.
Okay.
And this one up here is from that night with Gary Capetta's book with Lou Albano. Yeah. This one just about got everybody signed. I got your T-shirt too, Mike, without a doubt.
Terrific.
Near and dear, because that was the first time. My wife is from the West Coast, my wife Victoria. So she knew Pencil Neck Geek, Fred Blassie singing. At your Macabania, March 1st of 97, I had the immense pleasure of listening to Freddie do it live. And man, what a
man, I would have paid to see that.
Ironically, I told my cousin Jeff Buchans at the time to film it, just in case something came up. I ended up as CEO of a home video company in the 2000s for a couple of years. I had us sign the wrestling with DVDs. We sold 600,000 copies of that.
That's
match.
amazing. He told us that when we interviewed him on Dan and Benny. I was like dumbfounded. That's incredible.
The highest selling wrestling DVD of what, 2003, Mike?
2006.
2006. Howard Finkel had it because Howard had because Howard and I thought, he's like, I got a copy. I'm like, Howard, very good. I'm glad to hear it. Yes.
It was fun.
But when you think about it, Mike, that was before Heroes of Wrestling or any of these Legends shows. That was brilliant. You guys put together a great card. And Iron Mike Sharp got his due in that one, and I was happy for that.
He's a good guy. He ran things in the locker room. I ran things in the building. So it worked out being in front of people. I was the play-by-play announcer and ring announcer, but my real job was controlling the flow. So it worked out well. And we did have some great wrestlers. You're right. Mike Sharp, we had him go to a double countout against Bundy to keep him good.
Yeah.
Rest of the show.
And you had that Ken Patera doing the color commentary.
Yes. And we were reunited a couple of months ago doing commentary again. And that could be Mania 3.
Beautiful. And you honor Johnny Rods. God bless you.
Yep, the fire ran from the Bronx. I saw many times at the Garden, of course, other Eastern arenas. He was great. He always put on a great match.
Without a doubt. And I mean, one of the nicest people. I mean, look how many he's trained and sent to superstardom through the years. Unbelievable.
His nickname is all wrong, though. He was called Unpredictable. You could absolutely predict Johnny Rods was going to have a great match every single time.
I agree. No matter who we face.
I have a question for both of you guys. Getting back to Pedro, do you think that in retrospect, Bruno obviously was popular everywhere. I'm assuming that they assumed that Pedro would have that same popularity everywhere, and he did have it in Philly and he had it in New York, but obviously didn't have it in Boston. And I would imagine, when you go to Providence and Bangor, Maine, and places like that, I can't imagine he had the same. Did they miscalculate how popular they thought he was going to be?
I think it wasn't a terrible choice, but I remember the Pedro Morales from the early 60s was upper level preliminary, almost mid-card. He was an excellent wrestler. By the time he won the title, he did less wrestling, more this punching in the head and power moves. So it wasn't the same. Again, he worked in certain parts of the territory, not the whole place. I don't know. Nikita, what do you think?
Well, now, of course, Bruno needed a break. Now, here's a great question, Mike, and this has come up many times. Do you think they didn't pick Victor Rivera because of Victor's problems? Because he would have been the guy to go to. He was very popular.
Very popular.
Pulled it in.
Trust Victor
Rivera. Thought they could trust him.
Rivera was, after Arion left, Rivera was brought in as a number 2 face under Bruno. Teamed with Bruno, didn't get pinned, the usual stuff. And he was a face. He eventually was wooed by the IWA. He jumped ship, signed a deal, holding the tag belts without telling WWE. They got the belts off of them. He goes to IWA. IWA folds. He wants to come back. By that point, they didn't trust him. He's teaming with Johnny Rivera, who's pinned every other night. It wasn't the same. He eventually is an upper mid-card heel, teaming a bit with Arion under Fred Blassie, never the same. I don't think they trusted him. If he had stayed, could have been him.
Okay, and he done it a couple of times where he just, bye-bye, I'm out of here. And it's like, what the hell? I mean, you got the tag belt and you're gone.
Right.
And that really turned into a mess because then they had to give Dominic Pat Barrett as a partner. And it's like, oh, what a disaster.
The story on TV was Victor Rivera said he had to relinquish the tag titles because his lawyer told him to go after the singles world title. Obviously, you're never going to see Bruno against Rivera. That made no sense. Then Dominic was told he could pick a partner. He came on TV, picked Pat Barrett to be his partner. Story was Rivera would finish out his obligations. I saw him in Philly at the Spectrum work with Danucci, and then Barrett took over and promptly, about a month later, lost the belts to the Blackjacks.
Wild.
He had that one move, was the cannonball, which even that wasn't very good.
Yeah, that's right.
He looked like a short, fat guy. I was never into Irish Fat Barrett.
If I could, I want to throw out a quick name out there to Mike. Mario Milano.
Yep.
Do you think he was ever given, because he wrestled in 1970 in the WWF. He was hugely popular. And to me, I thought he would have been a great Bruno replacement. Perfect. Italian, fit the bill. Good looking guy. What happened with him?
Well, it's interesting. He did main event secondary arenas in single and tag matches. I saw him at Sunnyside in a main event tag at one point. And he won most of his matches.
Yeah.
But he was not over the extent of Bruno. He was like upper mid card, lower upper card, but he didn't have the it that Bruno had.
He didn't have the charisma. Yeah.
He wasn't at that.
I mean, who
level.
did?
He was credible. He was good. People believed he was good. He could hold his own. He was like even with Professor Toru Tanaka.
Right,
He
right.
beat a couple times, but also would go to draws against 20-minute time limit.
Now, Mike, I saved this for the end.
Okay.
Not that we're almost ready to end, but just I had to get this in. I highlighted it. You were there in Boston. It's actually tomorrow's the anniversary, May 15th, 1971, when Blackjack Mulligan was attacked.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Can you please elaborate?
It was the first and only match. It was supposed to be a rematch. Never happened. Pedro Morales defending against Blackjack Mulligan. Mulligan had finished in New York. Now he's doing Boston, Philly, etc. It was a typical back and forth match with Pedro trying to hit him, Mulligan being dastardly. Mulligan's getting the upper hand briefly. This fan, not overly well dressed, not fat, but a bit of a pot belly, jumps into the ring with a knife, stabs Mulligan in the leg. Immediately, within seconds, Gorilla Monsoon, and you know how big the guy was, races out of the dressing room. Monsoon, of course, was a face, but he ran in, grabbed the guy, hurled him out of the ring, attended to Mulligan. And they stopped the match. And that was it. There's, of course, no rematch in Boston. They went on to Tarzan Tyler, was on the undercard that night.
Now, how much confusion was going on? Because, I mean, what did Morales do? It's just like, I mean, what do we do from here? I mean,
He was bewildered. He backed off when Monsoon was in there. He let Monsoon handle Mulligan.
Was there an announcement made?
No, just the match was stopped.
Wow. Now, did it become like a riotous situation where people were panicked and fleeing?
No, people calmed down. People were upset. They hated Mulligan, of course, but they didn't like the stabbing. And they, on the other hand, they couldn't cheer for a heel. So people were bewildered. And remember, he's a bad human being. But
yes,
a bad human being shouldn't be stabbed in the leg. So it's a problem.
And that was a hell of a knife, right, Mike? That was big. Wasn't a
Here's
pen
another
knife.
weird match on the undercard. Tarzan Tyler against the former co-holder of the world tag belts, Tony Marino. Tyler was managed that night by Albano. Tyler attacks Marino before the bell. Starts stomping on him. Referee's just looking. Albano joins in. Two of them stomping on his leg. The referee rings the bell, starts the match, stops the match, says Marino's unable to continue. Made no sense. That's two finishes we got in the two top matches.
Holy mackerel. Now, after this incident, I guess things changed security-wise in the Boston Garden, right?
Pretty much, yeah. They're on their toes after that.
But that's when they started to put up the hockey plexiglass in the net.
Yep. Wow. Correct. That kind of did it.
See, in Baltimore,
real to that fan, right?
Well, that guy got away too, right? They never arrested him. They got him.
He got away. They were more concerned about Mulligan at the time.
And apparently, as the story goes, the knife was dipped in pig fat, and it caused a hell of an infection. But I understand Bruno really liked Mulligan, and he gave him a couple of months later in the Garden, like a 1-minute match to help him pay the medical bills, you know?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
It was like he wasn't the champ, but he had the match.
Yeah, but that's help Mulligan. He can't go long, but let's get him in there and get him out because, man, the guys, again, as we always talk, they didn't have insurance. They didn't have anything except what was in their pockets, and that was it.
Yeah, correct. It was tough.
And you had to love it. And if you didn't, that wasn't the place to be. Now, Mike, were you there with the night Superstar pinned Bruno? Were you in Philly because they had Putzi against Stasiak? Nobody is like, did anybody care? Obviously, nobody knew what the hell was going to happen in Baltimore.
I was in Philly to see to see Stasiak pin Morales, not to see Graham win the title.
Right, but that same night now in Baltimore, when Bruno was beaten by Superstar,
Right.
Philadelphia had a card. It was Stasiak against Putski.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember the results.
It wasn't much. Were you there, though?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it was they were fading out at that point, and then the Spectrum had begun. The Spectrum was already up and running.
Spectrum became monthly by that point. They're alternating Arena every other week, Spectrum periodically. Spectrum becomes once a month.
Now, when we had the big change, November 21st of 78, when they said no more Philadelphia Arena, we're going to go to the smaller venue, Allentown. How was it really getting sparse? Were you still following it in person at the Philadelphia Arena?
Yes, I still went to Philly while they were still taping.
How bad were the crowds?
Well, the crowds were never huge for the tapings. Enough people to make it look like people were there. But there were a zillion empty seats.
Yeah.
That's probably true for lots of TV tapings. I remember going to a TV taping when I was on a business trip in Texas at the Sport Auditorium, and people were bleeding, chasing each other with chairs. There's like 300 people. I got walked up that first row ringside for me and the person I was with.
But it was a good move because Allentown, of course, the smaller venue, that was packed and people were loving it. And they were giving them, well, they always had good matches at Philadelphia Arena. The title TV or the tag titles were changing there. And it was like, you knew good things were going to happen, especially if you saw George Napolitano there. Something was coming.
Right, something was up.
Right. Philly was the A show. Allentown was the B show.
At that time, yes.
At that time.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Mike, I got to ask you something. As a wrestling historian, I asked this to several people, but I'm always interested in their answer. Are we better off as professional wrestling fans in 2025 than we were in 1975? Now, in 75, all we had was the magazines. Now, I mean, literally between podcasts and wrestling websites, I mean, we're literally bombarded with information. But, on the flip side, in 75, we could buy a ticket for $4 or $5. Where now, we got to go in hot. I mean, and you could see, as a fan, you could see wrestling a lot more frequently. I think we're way better off back then.
I agree with you. I think that wrestling, it was great that people thought it was real, that we could believe in the guys like Bruno. But also, ticket prices, good point. Today, in 2025, too much filler on TV that you don't need to watch. You can scan. Too many long in-ring promos. I can't believe people pay $500,000-$700,000 ringside.
That's insane. I can't wrap my arms around that.
In-ring promos. And the matches are not must-see on TV most of the time. Even the pay-per-views, they give us one or two top things at a time, and the rest is fun filler. So I think back then was better.
And the Madison Square Garden show every month was like a pay-per-view when you really break it down.
Correct. And for me, when I was growing up, once I was 14, sometimes it was every 3 weeks to see Bruno on a Monday night at the Garden. It was minimum once a month.
Did you ever see Bruno with a ladder?
Which ladder? I'm sorry.
These goofy ladder
maybe at his house in Pittsburgh, hanging up the Christmas lights, maybe.
No,
It's like,
That was the only ladder Bruno ever
what
used.
the hell, man? Jeez. Oh, that's
Bruno was a straight
And
wrestler.
I
God
still
bless him,
remember.
but
I
it's like
still
this is
remember.
ridiculous.
I still remember how it felt as, you know, a 14-year-old kid in 1969. There was a luncheonette that was on my way home from school, and I'd stop there every day for one reason, to see if there was a new wrestling magazine. And the feeling that I felt when I saw a new magazine that I didn't have, you know, I bought it, and I would carry it home like I was carrying home like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was like a precious document. I couldn't wait to go home to read it, and like I miss that. I miss feeling like that.
I'm as guilty as you are. Same thing. I kept checking the newsstands.
every
In
day.
New York City and locally. And also, for a while, before I edited Wrestling Review, because Lou Eskin lived in our town, the store in my town would be the first in the country to have a new Wrestling Review. So I knew there to go there to buy it.
Wow, you were lucky. Do you
I was
realize how lucky you were, Mike?
I was lucky.
Yeah, I
Did
feel
you?
like we all were. That was just great. Now, the difference, of course, Madison Square Garden being New York, and then Philadelphia Arena, and then later the Spectrum being Philly, it still had its air of excitement, right? I mean, the
Yes.
Spectrum, and I know that had to be a beautiful building when they first opened it.
Very nice at the time. Yeah, they got large crowds because they put good matches in it. The shows tended to be stacked, which is the way to do it. And the Garden, which sold out most of the time, not always, was an electric atmosphere. It was the best place ever to see a wrestling match. It was the true A show in the universe.
No,
We
no,
had a
no entrance music either. You,
no.
you
We,
heard
we
you heard the. I remember watching on TV when the HBO carried it, the Garden shows, and you'd hear like the dull murmur of the crowd, and all of a sudden the Garden exploded, and you'd see Bruno walking down to the ring. He didn't need any entrance music.
You would see the flashes going off. You'd look
Yes,
towards the
yes.
dressing room, and when it's like somebody's coming, and it was like it's Tanaka, and it's like, man, like parting of the Red Sea. Everybody would just move. Or if it
Yep.
was Chief, then they gathered around, and it was family. If you hurt Strongbow or Bruno, man, your car is going to get wrecked when you're trying to get out of this building tonight. I'll tell
Yeah,
you.
pretty much. I actually got to go to the old Garden when I turned 14. My first live show, the old Garden, there's no TV in the area. The crowd was down, but it was Bruno pitting Hans Mortier Texas Death rematch, and Arion pitting Bull Ortega in the
Oh wow,
second
that's a blast. Oh, Ortega, wow.
in about 7 minutes with the hot seat.
Was that about 1968, 69?
Very good. It was 66.
Oh wow, okay.
And then last show, the old Garden, they had fans write in, allegedly, to say, who would you like Bruno to face at the last show? The winner was Professor Tanaka. Bruno had won on DQ 6 months before. They went into some tag team matches with Bruno and Arion. And Bruno and Arion beat Monsoon and Tanaka. But they took the final fall off of Monsoon, not Tanaka. So Bruno Tanaka closed out the old Garden. And the crowd was back for that. They'd gotten TD back on a Spanish station in New York. And it wasn't sold out, but it's almost sold out. It's about 14,000.
And then Bruno beat Bull Ramos, right? Was the first match in the new Garden?
I was there, correct. It took Bruno about last match on the show, took about 4 minutes for him to win by submission.
That's when they were calling him Apache Bull Ramos.
Correct.
Was Homer Odell still his manager then?
Yes, he was there.
Okay.
Spirito Negro was his name. And the buildup had been Odell kept tripping Ramos's opponents on TV, including Arnold Skolin. Ramos couldn't beat anyone on his own. Bruno annihilated him quickly.
I mean, that was a big guy, and Bruno got him in the backbreaker for the. I mean,
That's
he had
correct.
300 pounds if he was, anything.
On that
Yeah.
same show, New Garden, Kentucky Butcher got a rare pin over Ed Carpentier.
Yes.
I know in real
Wow.
life.
Yeah, because I remember that Ray Morgan made a big deal of that the next week on TV. He
They
said,
foreshopped
he said, I
Carpentier.
can't believe that he beat
Lost.
Carpentier. And of
Never
course, it was
lost.
building up. And I think that was when I'll never forget this, when Butcher wrestled Arnold Skolin on TV.
Correct.
Gave him the whammy, and then
Yep.
the referee's coming with the stretcher, and then both Butcher and Bobby Davis upended the stretcher, and I mean, Skolin literally flew over the top rope, and then the next week, Ray Morgan was given the address of White Plains Hospital to send postcards. I mean, how does it gets no? And then Davey O'Hannon told me one time, he goes, "Yeah, I sent Arnold a postcard." Like, we were so like invested in it.
Mike, I consider you an expert, and I can't let you go until you give us your opinion, because you were there in the buildings. How was Bob Backlund as champion? Did he get over? That's always a topic.
No, he never really did. The cards at the Garden were so stacked. They bring in Bruno. They brought in people from other territories regularly. In the 70s, I saw people who you could dream about seeing in the magazines. They all came to the Garden. One night, the Funks were not in the area, closed out against the Kangaroos were not in the area. Bob Roop came up. Florida guys came up. Jack Briscoe, Bobby Shane would tear the house down in Philly and in New York. Backlund was not fully over himself. They drew crowds, yet very strong undercards. It was about the whole show.
Gotcha.
I loved him as a heel in that brief run. He was great as a heel at the Garden.
I had to ask. You were there. I respect your opinion without a doubt.
Yeah.
Benny, what you got? Anything left?
No, we're pretty much at the time limit here, and
Thank you, Mike.
The curfew, and Mike, I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you.
Your insights and wisdom. It really was a pleasure.
But
thanks for having me.
This is what we told the audience. You were somebody that was there, witnessed it, had the good wrestling brain for it. So you weren't just there. You took it in.
Were there.
You're the journalist.
What was it? Edward R. Murrow. You are there, right?
Thank you.
Between you and our esteemed guests, I feel like I'm studying at Princeton for my PhD in professional wrestling. So I'm assuming pretty soon you're going to give me the topic for my thesis.
Okay.
I'd like to write a thesis on Arion. That'd be great.
There's a great YouTube video, real fast, about Arion not losing by some people who never saw him wrestle, but did about 10 minutes from territory to territory, how he hardly ever lost a match. They counted something like he lost 10 times in 400 matches in WWE. And of course, most of those were the blow-offs against Bruno. Once in Philly on the way out to Killer Kowalski the first time.
Yeah. Wow.
Kowalski.
Yep. Well, guys, many thanks to everyone who joined us for When It Was Real. Like we just mentioned, we have some great stuff planned for you. So please hit the like and subscribe buttons so you won't miss any episodes of this great Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. I urge you to check the channel out. There is literally a treasure trove of excellent interviews and content on it. And we'll be back next week to take you on another awesome trip in the wrestling Wayback Machine. So for the great Nikita Brezhnikov and for our wonderful guest, Michael Omansky, this is Benny Scala, the one and only player, also the poet laureate of the Monte and the Pharaoh channel, leaving you with this. Every week, we listen to such great stories of wrestling heroes and wrestling glories. We're back next week for another shot. And as always, we'll save you a spot. Night, guys.
До свидания, товарищ.
Good night.